Welcome to DasGeek. This video series is going to all be about privacy and protecting yourself on the internet. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do different in this video is I'm going to give you tips and tricks that you can actually implement and still enjoy using the internet, because a lot of people, when you start talking about privacy, you get into InfoSec, those people can get so outrageous with what they want you to do that by the time you actually could use the internet, you would be able to visit like 3 sites, or it would cost you thousands of dollars in burners or special scripts you got to set up to switch Mac IDs and all kinds of different things that are great if you're a professional and then you don't need this type of video. But for your everyday user, what are some ways that we can lower the attack vectors very simply and make it just far more easier to frankly hack somebody else rather than get to you? And that's what these tips are going to do. In this episode, we're going to focus on one of the most important things that most people are actually terrible about, even technical people, so-called technical people, are terrible about, and that is passwords. I'm going to teach you how to be safe with your passwords, how to generate effective passwords, and how to mitigate the risk of somebody hacking you. Now, there is no such thing as 100% security. Even if you went with the aluminum foil hat mode and you tried your best to follow all of the crazy ideas and had burner phones and different machines that you used for different things and all of that, you're still not 100% secure. Nobody is. The only way to be 100% safe on the internet is to disconnect the thing. But what this is going to do is just make it, it's like if you were a robber and you were going, there were 2 houses you were going to rob. One had the door wide open and one had a bunch of locks on the door and some guard dogs around. That's going to be our house. Less likely a robber's going to want to attack that one when you could just walk through the front door of the other one. That's what we're hoping to accomplish here. So let's get into it right now. I'm going to teach you how to be safe with your passwords. Somewhere around over 14 million people become victims of identity fraud. That's 1 in every 15 people. So your chances of something like this happening are extremely high. One of the other statistics that's increasingly troublesome is children are 51 more times likely to become victims of identity theft and things like that than adults. So they're certainly targeting social security numbers and information on kids that you don't think about. Your kids don't have credit cards yet. They're not out there opening bank accounts and doing those type of things. So those are perfect victims for hackers to take advantage of if they're capable. 33% of the adults in the US have been victims of being hacked or part of identity theft. So this is a big issue. And for those people, as we get into the different privacy segments, they're like, I don't do anything wrong on the internet. I have nothing to worry about. They don't care. They're still going to take your information. So just listen, fill your brains here. You're going to learn a lot. Let's figure out passwords right now. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is password length. Now, you've probably heard that you shouldn't be using obvious passwords like password 123, or like the name of your kids and their birthday, or your name and your birthday, and things like this. It's easily identifiable information people can pull off social media sites. They can get from your friends. Generally, they don't even have to go to your friends' site, social media sites, because these are things that so many people ignorantly provide freely on so many websites. Websites like, oh, you can't proceed to see this picture of the celebrity doing something zany. You got to enter your birthday. And they're like, okay. And they give that information away freely. Or Facebook, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your hobbies, dating sites, all of these things. And people just freely give all of this information out in hopes of getting some of these services for free that they utilize. And then they don't protect any of this information with passwords. They don't use complex passwords, so hackers are easily able to put information together, like out with my friends celebrating my birthday. Gee, what day is it? How old does this person look? I bet I can guess what their password is. And then there's so many programs out there that can look through dictionaries and utilize commonly used words and be able to guess a password. That's why I recommend, and they are a sponsor of this channel and of the Destination Linux network, Bitwarden. Bitwarden is an amazing service It allows you to protect all of your passwords, allows you to generate new passwords for every single site that you visit. And even if you didn't use Bitwarden, which you should, but you're using another password generator or tool like that, is far, far better than having the single password that you're using for all of your sites. And if you don't take any of my advice for the rest of this series, do not utilize the same password, because one company has a terrible practice of putting their files out on some Amazon server or Azure server or whatever, and then they have all their passwords unencrypted in a text file. It's happened a billion times out there in the news. Then they have access to not only that site, whatever site that you were a part of that didn't protect those passwords, but if you reuse that same password everywhere else, they have access to all your information across all different sites. So different password for every service. That's almost impossible to remember. That's why we create tools for that. That's why tools like Bitwarden exist. And if you go to bitwarden.com/DLN, you can get started for free, have an account of Bitwarden. I trust Bitwarden because, number one, they're completely open source. Number two, they hire third-party firms as well to come in, security experts, to check out their code. They post all of those reports just as they are, so you can see all of the security. They patch everything as soon as they find any issues at all. It's just a very awesome company. It costs $10 a year. $10 a year to save you potentially thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in theft. So it's well worth it. But there are other services out there as well. They may not be open source. They probably don't have the security audits and things, which is why I suggest Bitwarden. You can also host it yourself. So if you don't trust anybody else to host it, you don't want it out there in the cloud, that's cool. You can host Bitwarden entirely yourself. So how does a password generator work? Well, this is an example of Bitwarden here. This is an example of a generated password. This would take forever for some of these encryption tools to actually go and break. In fact, if you make this between 25 and 64 characters, think about how long it would take for a password tool to crack this. They would be better off going after the next email address they have where the guy uses password 123 than trying to crack that thing there. You'll never remember it, but the great thing is with Bitwarden, you could just sit there and copy it and paste it directly in. You don't have to manually type this stuff either, and a lot of times it'll autofill if you want to set up Bitwarden for that. And you're setting up one big main password that should be between 25 and 64 characters long that you would use to unlock Bitwarden, and then you're going to set up two-factor authentication. What is two-factor authentication? Well, just like when you go to an ATM and you have to put in your card, you have to physically have the card, and you have to have a PIN number, that's two factors of authentication that have to happen there. With passwords, it's the same way. You want two factors of authentication. My first factor is going to be my password. My second factor is going to be a code, like if you use a tool called Authy on your phone, for instance, AUTHY. That is a generator of these two-factor authentication codes. So I have to have the password. Then I have this time code that refreshes every 30 seconds or so with a completely different code, and I have to type that code as well. So even if the hacker could crack that password, they're also going to have to get through my two-factor authentication in addition to get into that account. That is going to keep you so much safer. Again, nothing's 100%. Than if you're just using regular passwords yourself. So with Bitwarden, I use one really long password. You can use sentences, but definitely include symbols and numbers is even better. And you basically go to websites, and whatever their maximum amount of characters they allow is, if it's up to 65, make it 65. Whatever they allow, if they allow you to have symbols, if they allow you to have lowercase and uppercase, make sure that you check all of these. And if those sites don't, what's cool about services like Bitwarden is I can uncheck those things and then regenerate a password. Let's say the site doesn't allow me to have special characters, doesn't allow me to have numbers. That'd be a stupid website. Probably wouldn't go to it anyways. But in that case, I could at least generate all of this random text here as a password, and I can keep regenerating different passwords for every site that I want. It's just a fantastic service. So you need a good password manager that you trust so that you can create complex passwords. The other thing about this series I want to talk about is I had an awesome individual in the community who's in the InfoSec industry professionally go through all of my notes, go through all my recommendations, add in their notes, add in different suggestions. And this was one where I was more, I think, originally on like, you need a password that's at least 25 characters long. and they came in and recommended actually as long as you can possibly go, but anything over 25 is recommended. So I've also had my work checked, like Bitwarden has their work checked, my security professionals as well. And that individual didn't want to be named, but thank you so much again for your help in offering that awesome information. Woo! See, this is the time where we take a break. We got some mead here. We got the Valentine's sticker going because it's almost Valentine's Day. If you're of age, of course, and you like to try some mead, mead is fantastic. The next thing we're going to discuss is these rascals here, these phones, because people are so bad at securing their phones. I have friends that are so bad at securing their phones that I play tricks on them when they leave their phones just sitting out and they go run to the bathroom or run to the car or whatever and leave their phone there, change their wallpapers to something silly to teach them a lesson that you need to take your phone very seriously. We keep more personal information in our phone than anywhere else. You probably have a banking app. You probably have all of your emails on there. You have all of your private photos on there. You have text messages and things. This device probably has more privacy information on it than your actual computer itself. So it's really important that you find ways to lock your phone down. So how do you do that? Well, do not rely on biometrics alone. Biometrics are super convenient, right? You can use your fingerprint, you can have a face scan. They're super easy to use. You get in your phone really quick. But the problem is they can also be circumvented. While the technology has gotten better and it's much more difficult to trick some of these with a high quality photo and things, it still can be done. And biometrics can be taken as well, right? You have your fingerprints left on a drink like this and they can be lifted just like a cop at a crime scene and things can do to it. So those things can be tricked. Let's say you get pulled over. Cop wants your phone, wants to see proof if you were at the bar, if you were doing something you weren't supposed to, whatever. They're supposed to at least maybe get a subpoena to look at that. But if you have your phone to where they could just point it at your face and unlock it, you are now giving up really critical privacy rights right there in that moment that you can't stop because they just pointed it at your face. And maybe there are laws that say they shouldn't do that and things, but there are plenty of stories out there showing that that type of stuff has happened in the past. So again, multiple authentication is the key here. In my case, my phone can unlock with a Face ID, but it will lock itself with a password once it times out. So after a certain amount of time, I pick up my phone, it unlocks with my Face ID. It's still going to ask me for a password, and then I'm in my phone. So I have 2 factors of authentication, and my screen times out after a small amount of time. And you can usually set that window, whether you're in iOS or Android, of how long it takes for your phone to lock and go into that screen mode. There are also things like this called YubiKeys. I actually got a whole series of these off of eBay that came and were shipped with the Wired magazine, and a lot of people didn't use them, maybe didn't know what they were for, but these are awesome little things here. YubiKeys can also, depending on the version you get, work with your device. So you would have to have this physical key on your keychain that you would put on your phone, and that would create an unlock. But even better, something like YubiKey, what it does is you can plug it into your computer and it acts as that 2-factor authentication. So you have to have that physical thing like a credit card you would have to have. And basically when it asks for that 2-factor authentication, instead of having to type in that one-time password, you push the top of the YubiKey and then it lets you inside, and then you pull that key out. And now, unless somebody has that key and then has your password, they're not going to be able to get into your devices. You can use it with your phone. You can use it with your computers. Having this physical 2nd-factor authentication is really an awesome way to stay secure. Now, I know a lot of people like to use these lock patterns or ALPs, and the problem with these lock patterns is people tend to use the same patterns, so much so that there's been studies on it that show exactly where people typically do these patterns. Additionally, the smudges that you leave on the screen of your phone can also reveal, because you're doing it so often, and we know all of our fingers love to leave smudges all over the screen, that a good hacker can actually go in there if they got physical access of your device and be able to figure out likely where your actual pattern is. So I'm not a huge fan of the patterns, but if you're using 2-factor authentication and you want to use a pattern, it's definitely safer than just having pattern by itself as your only authentication. You know how I was talking about the phone having it auto lock after a certain amount of time, and then it requires you to actually enter in a password? It's not going to lock itself with just a biometric. The same thing happens with your PC. This happens in the workplace. If you work in a corporate environment, there are probably a lot of rules. Some corporations enforce them, some don't. But there are a lot of rules about leaving your PC unlocked, because leaving your PC unlocked means anybody who just happens to wander in the building could get onto that PC and start using it. So keep the same security settings that you'd have on your phone, where after 30 seconds or a minute, it automatically locks. Consider doing that for your PC. Now, it may be really annoying every 30 seconds or minute on your PC, you're studying a spreadsheet or something, not moving a mouse, and all of a sudden it locks. So for your PC, 10 minutes is what is recommended out there from the National Institute of Standards and Technology of being idle and requiring a password to unlock your screen. So consider setting that in your settings to 10 minutes. And just so you all know what that looks like, this is Fedora here, the beautiful, gorgeous Fedora, amazing operating system. By the way, you're interested in privacy and security, we're going to talk about stop using Windows, get into Linux, and enjoy true privacy and security. But before we get there, we're still on passwords. This is, for instance, I just typed in screen lock, got to this setting. You can see it's going to blank my screen after 10 minutes, do an automatic screen lock delay, screen turns off, show notification on lock screen. So this automatically locking the screen prevents others from accessing the computer while you're away. Windows has this, Mac OS has this, whatever distro operating system you're utilizing, they probably have settings like this. The last thing we're going to talk about here is security questions. These are the new and easy way to break into anybody's account. A lot of people think about these security questions as a form of two-factor authentication, and technically they can be, but because of the rise of social media and the amazing advancements in phishing attempts, where because of social media, these phishing attempts are so much more personal, so much more realistic, so much more likely to feel real to your everyday users. Even professionals out there can be tricked by these things, that it's really not a great two-factor authentication, because many of these can be gained, this information can be gained from reading through your emails, if they're able to get into that, looking at your social media posts and things along those lines. So questions like, after you do your password, they want you to know, where were you born? What is your maiden name? Who is your best friend growing up? All things that people generally at some point or another may mention in a Facebook post, in a Twitter post. There may be something that alludes to it in photos and things that you leave up. So my suggestion for security questions is to use completely obscure, nonsensical questions in answering them, and it's going to keep you much, much safer and make the security questions actually useful. For instance, what's my favorite candy bar? 2416, 43, 24, color red. Like, that's my answer. There's nothing saying you have to actually give these sites real answers for those questions. It's just matching a question. It's just really matching the answer, whatever you put in there. So it's going to ask, what's your favorite candy bar? Beeswax 2416 black. Like, whatever you want to put there, you can. And that way, even if somebody's looking on your social media and is like, man, that guy eats a lot of Skittles, I bet the answer to his two-factor authentication is Skittles. They will be wrong. Although Skittles are delicious, you got to taste the rainbow. They're amazing. But you might be asking yourself, okay, so I make up some obscure, stupid answer like Bigfoot is really real, 2416 for where was I born? How am I going to remember that? Well, that's where you use a service like Bitwarden. So you can see the key here. Bitwarden, by the way, was something that I used well before they ever sponsored this channel. I love Bitwarden because they have all these options there. They have the ability to have a secure notes section as well. So you put all your one big giant password that you remember, complex password, multiple authentication options like using, for instance, a YubiKey, because Bitwarden's compatible with that, so that's the most secure place where all your passwords are stored. And then what you can do in there is actually go into the secure notes and put that as your security answers in the secure notes section, along with your complex and different password for every website that you use, so you don't have to remember those. And the cool thing is about Bitwarden, you can have it on your phone, you can have it on your computer, you can self-host it yourself, you can have it everywhere. It's always on you, so you don't have to worry about not being able to get into your account. So this is the passwords section of privacy and security in this video series that we're going to be covering. Next, we're going to talk about actually how to stay private on the internet, how to avoid giving away all of your information, and some tips and hacks and tricks and things to be able to accomplish that, but do it in such a way that you can still have a reasonably fun time on the internet without, without having to just disconnect the internet to stay private. So that's it. That's my video. Thank you so much for watching. I know you guys absolutely loved the Tor videos and the dark web and stuff. So this is a natural progression for us. Let me know in the comments additional tips and tricks that you have that you found can keep people safe. I always look forward to reading the comments. And until next time, get out there and fill your brains.
Don't forget to subscribe! And make them if you like this video.